When you're ready.
She's ready.
I guess she's ready. I'm going to call the Springfield City Council work session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Councilors Pitts,
Here.
Moe,
Here.
Rodley,
Here.
Ster,
Here.
Woodrow,
Here.
and Pictionary.
I'm here.
All right. We have two work session items tonight. The first one's council vacancy charter amendment with Mary Bridget.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here tonight to speak with you about a second discussion on the potential change to the charter for how the city fills vacancies for elected officials. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, great. So in your packet tonight, there is a council briefing memorandum. My intent with the discussion tonight is just to reframe the issue and then provide the council an opportunity to provide comment and feedback and questions. I don't have a PowerPoint or any other written visuals for the meeting this evening. This is our second time discussing this issue. We were before you, I believe in February or March. This time, we're focusing more of the information on a survey of the 25 most populous cities in Springfield and in Oregon, I should say, and where Springfield falls with those and how other communities fill vacancies. There's also some information following up on council direction about conducting a telephone poll and then a potential schedule. Just a reminder, a charter amendment is something that is approved by the voters. So the council would have to put a ballot title on a ballot in order to have that move forward. The issue, if you recall, we had a circumstance where, when Mayor Lundberg stepped down, she had recently been reelected and she had a new term starting in January. So that complicated when her vacancy actually started and resulted in a situation where the city was operating with a pro tem mayor. And then someone was appointed and the election for the successor isn't until the next general biennial. That brought forward some community interest in looking like, hey, maybe Springfield can approach this differently in a way that has maybe more direct accountability to the voters and a faster process for filling a vacancy. And this materials are really meant to just provide you with information about where Springfield falls. And then just the last note I would note, Springfield approved its charter in the early 2000s. It's based off a model charter. I think at the time that was either through, it's now through the League of Oregon Cities, but before that had been through the university, a group there. There was a citizen committee, but our charter is aligned with other communities like ours. It's not like we're dealing with an outlier charter. So just to give you some frame of reference. So I'd be happy to take any questions or direction that you have and see how you'd like to move this forward.
Leonard.
So thanks, Mary B. I think there's reference made in the packet to possibly sending out a survey for public input, and I think that's generally a good idea. The understanding that I have been getting from the public comment at the meetings before we adjourned was that they wanted more transparency and more accountability, more democracy in a way in this process. And that would include potentially throwing this open to an election, to a popular election. And Mayor Van Gordon and I were talking earlier today about the possibility of adopting some sort of hybrid plan where there would be an election that would be held if the vacancy occurred outside of a certain time frame from the next election cycle. And I think that that's probably, that might be judicious, but I do approve of the plan to get public input at this point. And also I think the other item for public input should probably be whether they want to limit the field of possible candidates for a vacancy to the council. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Early.
I had a couple thoughts. I think maybe a hybrid process might be something we could consider or look at. I look back at what happened. I don't expect all those things to line up again ever.
Yeah.
That just happened to be, everything fell into place at one time. I don't expect ever to have a mayor be in a position where she felt she needed to resign, 6 months after she was elected or whatever the time frame was, and then have to go through the process before she could then resign from her newly elected term. All those things just lined up in a perfect storm. I mean, there just wasn't, I don't expect that to ever happen again. So I'm looking a little bit, not as urgently isn't the word I want, but I don't feel like we need to, like this needs to be something that has to be totally new or different. I look at it, my concern about going out for any kind of a special election is, number one, the cost.
Yep.
But the other part of it is the amount of time. If you put a special election out right away, you don't give community members enough time to, number one, have an idea as to whether they want to be involved in the process or not, get acquainted in the community. I mean, there's other parts to that would be nullified if a special election happened right away. So I kind of like our being pretty much like a lot of the communities in the way that it's set up with the next biennium and everything. But I'm not, I'm okay with considering a hybrid and what Leonard was just talking about. So, but I'm just not feeling the sense of urgency to just put everything out there and change the charter. I don't feel like we weren't transparent. We had everything out in front of the public with how we had to follow the charter, and we didn't have a choice. We had to follow the charter. So I don't, somebody's impression is their issue, not ours. I feel like we were as transparent as we could be. So that's my comments for now.
Corey, and extra points for Corey for raising your hand.
I'm learning now if I can just remember how to put it down. So I think that there's two things that I remember that were pivotal and key to this conversation. One is this part that we're talking about in terms of the timing, whether or not it's an election or appointment, that part. So that piece. The other piece, which I don't know is necessarily in the charter, which is part of what created a lot of the hullabaloo, is who was allowed to be considered for mayor. And I don't know if that's something that gets addressed by the charter or not, but my memory is that was a big part of the challenges that we were trying to deal with. And I wasn't on council at the time until I got on council, and it was just, we already decided what we're going to do. So those are the two big pieces was, and so some of the transparency was not necessarily around, what's the process, because the people were trying to figure out what the process was and what the charter says, but also around who was going to be allowed to be considered for mayor. So those are the two pieces. I just want to keep that as part of the conversation. I also understand that a special election is expensive, and we aren't necessarily the kind of municipality that has the money for special elections. But, and this is one of the things that I've said to a few folks is, I want it to be as absolutely democratic as possible. So whatever election, whoever can participate, just to make it as open and transparent as we possibly can without spending an arm and a leg. So I could probably go with a hybrid. I could go with let's talk about when's the next reasonable election. But I think we also just need to keep part of the conversation. It's like, who gets to be considered to be the mayor, or who gets to be considered, we did a different process for councilor. So that's part of it too. Thank you.
Damien.
Hi. So I definitely agree with what other councilors said. I mean, I think the financial piece and wondering, how much it would cost to do a special election. But on that piece, like I think about after I took office, I think a couple of months later, there was a school board election. And if that was the case where it lined up like that, could it be possible to where the council, mayor, whatever that situation would have been on that particular ballot, to where you throw that position in with that, but then also kind of what Councilor Steer mentioned, time period, like would it be different if it was, the for example, the council position had 3.5 years left on the term versus 6 months. And I could see potentially having an election for something that's longer than 2 years, maybe even, 1 year, but any shorter than that, that might be, a lot of money, especially, you figure election season is getting ready to come up pretty soon. And why would you spend that much money for someone to be interim, and then there's another process right after that? And so I think timing is of the essence, looking at it from a financial standpoint. That's just, especially as somebody who was appointed and thinking about that. I mean, if it would have been, I won't hold office for 2 years. And if it would have been longer, I could understand an election, but you'd be surprised at how fast this time goes and how much money, it would cost for something that's 1.5 years, and that money could be utilized for something different.
Joe?
Oh, excuse me. So, I guess I'm just going to be straight out. If it's not fixed, if it's not broke, why try to fix it? This has been working for years and years and years. We have comparable cities of this size that operate under the same type charter, almost verbatim. What are the odds of something like this coming up again, literally? Right. And if you look at this, it's the way it's set up, and it's just like what Councilor Pitts just said, is if it's early in the term, then it allows for an election halfway through. It has that time. I'm not interested in spending extra money for a special election when no matter what happens, no matter when that person's term ends, it's going to be an election so the entire city can decide at that time. I haven't seen anything in a city since 2004 that has been so urgent that we had to put some sort of a special election in there where it can't be done in its regularly scheduled time. I get everybody's, not everybody's, I understand what a few people are saying, and I get that. But again, I think the city has been operating fine. I think it's been operating fair. It has been very transparent. And I think that, again, I think we ought to go with what we're doing. But if the council goes the other direction, okay. But if it does, then I think we need to look at the charter, and I want some other changes in that charter that are way overdue in my mind. If we want to go that route as a money savings, I'm not interested in spending as much money going to the charter or going to an election to change the charter every year, and it costs us money. So we've done it once, not that long ago. The charter was changed not that long ago as far as historical times for a city. But again, if it's not broke, I don't see the need to fix it, especially at the price of fixing it at this point. I don't see the same issue coming up anytime in the near future and even in the far future. So that's where I'm at.
All right, so I'm hearing, go ahead, Marilee. You're on mute, Marilee.
Just to clarify in my own mind, and I think I saw it in the packet, that a greater than and less than amount of time for a counselor replacement, so that if they have less than a certain amount of time, then they serve out the term. If there's a greater amount of time left in a counselor's position, then they only serve to the next biennium, if I'm correct, because I think that's what happened with Sherry. Sherry replaced, and she was up for election within 2 years because of the term that she replaced. So am I remembering correctly?
I believe so.
Okay. So there is a time element already in there, that if you replace someone, you only have, you basically have 2 years at the most and a year before you would campaign for your position. So
I think that's accurate.
That's my understanding too.
So I think there's a couple things to consider, and then we can kind of pull back and talk and talk about, well, what is it exactly does the hybrid sort of function mean? One of them, and I will tell you that having a charter amendment that mandates a special election without some sort of guardrails, right? Like the concern I would have is that what would happen would be we would have sort of off-cycle elections, and they would kind of be all over the place. And, you know, we would let 5% of the electorate sort of decide, when we can, you know, sort of think through this a little bit more and get less politically motivated folks, more people to vote, right? So I think having the appropriate amount, like thinking through this, becomes sort of critical to be able to turn it into something, to turn it into something that's sort of useful. The other thing that I think is valuable to sort of pull back, and then we can ask the question, well, what does hybrid mean to folks? Is that if in a situation where we would have played out the same event, in theory, we would have had two sort of elections, right? Like from the moment of January 1, and I'm going to sort of talk about the term all the way, like we had probably, Damien, I feel like Damien got here in March, maybe, right? Like, so we probably that was a 60-day time frame. And I think it's valuable to consider that if we don't sort of think through this, right? Like we could have just finally got through that set of elections and onto issues and got sort of fully here, you know, just essentially recently, because you would have to space those elections out. We would have had 2 elections last year to get the same result, if you will. So I think it's valuable to sort of kind of pull back and go, okay, when we think about this a hybrid approach, what are people trying to solve, right? Like, because if it's a timing question, then it's valuable to pursue. I mean, if it's who's in the, you know, how many years can you hold elected office before you actually have to be on a ballot, right? I think that's a different question. And if it's more of a broad question about, okay, you know, do we want to have more clear rules about how to approach this? I think those are all valuable questions to go, okay, we were in a really rare thing, but what's the question that's sort of pressing for folks? Because I hear a lot of interest in hybrid, but I think we need to kind of think through, okay, well, what does hybrid actually mean? So I don't see any hands shooting up, so I'll give you an example.
Leonard.
Oh, go ahead, Leonard.
A little late on the draw there, sorry. So I guess what I'm missing here is the possibility of a survey. Are we still talking about possibly consulting the public on this?
I think we have to decide if we could do that. That's within the realm of possibility. But I think we would have to decide about, well, what are we actually asking, right? Like,
yeah.
Because with how many things were happening at that time, there could be 2 or 3 different questions that.
Okay, well, I see. I saw 2 issues coming into this, and now I see possibly 3. One of the issues is definitely whether there's going to be a special election to fill a vacancy. Number 2, within what time frame? That's the new one. And then 3, whether the field of potential fillers of the vacancy would be limited to the council or not. And I think I would consider it useful to have the public's input on all 3 of those issues.
All right, Corey.
One of the things that I don't think that we have in our charter, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is the time frame piece. So when I'm thinking about a hybrid, I'm like, okay, if it gets to a place where we don't go with a special election, then I would want some time considerations Because I think some of them have them where you have to fill within 30 days or 60 days or whatever. So that's what I'm thinking. We don't have that on ours. And I'm with Counselor Stair in that I think we need to clarify what the process is. And again, I'm not clear whether that's something that goes in the charter that says so that we can build in more inclusion in the process, or if that's something that's a policy in some other way. But I think that's the other piece. So when I'm thinking about hybrid, that's what I'm thinking about. It's like we need to have some time constraints, whichever way we go. That's it.
Joe.
So I think they're still talking. I don't know if I'm not sure if the word hybrid is correct. I mean, we're either going to change it and call it this new one, or we're not going to change it. So I'm not sure. There's multiple changes. Like Councillor Rodley was talking about, doing a time limit, which is a major deviation from what we're doing. You're saying 60 days. Well, that's Eugene does it. I think I turn to look at the chart, and Eugene has it has to be filled within so many days by way of an election. Successor chosen by special election at the very next May or November election. So you're still talking a significant deviation from what we're doing right now. You're talking about significant expense. A poll is very expensive, anywhere up to $10,000. And again, I just don't see the huge need to dive into something like this when you look at it and say, okay, we're going to spend this much money, we're going to talk about it for this many hours and potentially poll and the public, et cetera, et cetera. When is it going to come up like this? When is this need for this change? And I so far have not seen a great need for a deviation from what we're doing. What we've been doing has worked fine. We can add, and please correct me, Mary B, if in that charter, as far as the council can include anybody they want, they're not bound to choose within the council. So
Right.
we already have that. We already have that inclusion that the council can do by way of the majority vote. And the public has elected us to represent them. So we're representing the public, and if we want to include 150 different people or open it up to the entire city with applications, it's within the council's power to do that without violating the city charter. So I'm not so sure why that has to be in print when it's already there. So.
All right, Bridget.
If it's all right with you, if I could just spend a couple minutes, I think, trying to ask some questions about what it is I think I'm hearing from you all that might help kind of move some direction forward. I'm going to try and lower my hands now. So I think what I'm hearing when you say hybrid is you're talking about like there's two different issues here in terms of when the timing and the transparency for selecting the appointed person, right, who gets appointed and then later runs. So I think that's one issue. Then the second issue is, when does that person actually have to run? Like, what does that mean? And what are those impacts and what is the cost? So looking at, if I'm right in that, looking at that first issue about making the appointment. So the way the charter is very broad now, it just says the council by majority vote appoints the person. One option, and I think, charters, remember, like, are the same level as your constitution, right? So they're not going to have like, A, B, and C, like a lot of detail. Now, for example, there's another community, Medford, has the same council makes the appointment, but does have more information in its code about how that appointment gets made. That has more parameters for the council. It's not just a wide open decision by the council in terms of making a decision. So for example, it provides for that the council will start the process for making an appointment within 45 days when a vacancy happens. Start the process, not complete the process. That they will have an application that everybody fills out, the same application, that they have a committee that provides a citizen committee that provides feedback to the council, that they have an interview. So they have some more sideboards on the actual making the appointment of the person that is in their municipal code. It's not in the charter. It's not a charter amendment that's go to voters, but it could get at this sort of transparency issue maybe, or this appointment issue. What the downside to that is, I would, just to say in terms of being your attorney and advising you, you're going to lose some flexibility there, because the way those kinds of things are written is you got to follow the process that you adopt. But that does provide some sideboards about how you select that person, which in turn is the person who most likely will run to eventually be elected. So that's one option to think about in terms of selecting. The other thing I would say about timing, I think Eugene is 90 days to make the selection for the person they appoint. Other jurisdictions, but Bend has a very short time frame. It's 30 days. And the information I had from Bend when I consulted with them is that's just really a short amount of time to make an appointment, to really get, if you want public input or if you want to have some kind of process, that's a tough time to really make that. So that's what I can tell you in terms of timing. And if that helps at all, I think what I'm hearing is the hybrid issue is the appointment process of the person. And then the other kind of part of the hybrid is, when does the election actually occur? Does that sound like I'm more in the ballpark? Okay.
Yeah, we got a couple issues that we're sort of unpacking here. Leonard?
Thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. I was listening with some interest to what Councilor Pishneri was saying about the process not being broken right now. I think that given the opportunity, the council is probably going to want to maintain as much control of the process as possible. I mean, we're human, we operate with a desire to exert as much control as we can. And so I think this is a valuable opportunity that we've got right now to consider the public's opinion and ask them whether they want us to have complete final control of the process or not. And that's more or less why I want to bring them in at this point.
Corey?
I think Councillor Woodrow was before me.
Oh, I think you, all right, we can go with Mary Lee first.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to be very blunt. We were elected to make the decisions. We're elected to represent the public. If we find it necessary to go out and ask them a certain policy or a certain procedure, or what do you think about a zoning issue or something like that, that's when we go out and ask that. Otherwise, we've been elected to be aware of the public opinion. They know how to reach us and they know how to get a hold of us to let us know. I have not had a cavalcade of people telling me that they want the charter changed. Once we got settled in the beginning of the year with our appointments, I haven't heard a word since. So that doesn't indicate to me that we've got 60,000 population out there telling me that they want to change the charter. I appreciate the issues that came up a year ago, but I still think it was a perfect storm of all things, all the crazy things lining up all at one time. I've paid attention to what's gone on council now for over 20 years. And we've had councilors leave. We've had councilors resign. We've had mayors move on because they've been elected in a new position. People have been replacing them. And there's never been an issue. The community has never jumped in and said, hey, we don't want you to do that anymore. We don't like the way that was done. And like I said, we just happened to be in the middle, in my opinion, we just happened to be in the middle of a perfect storm a year ago. We were trying to figure out the chart, exactly what we had to do to align ourselves with the charter, because it was different parts that we had not been in the middle of before. But we made it through and we got it done. But like I said, since that point, I have not had anyone come to me and say, when are you going to change the charter? When are you going to put it out there and change the charter? I've not had anybody come to me about it. And I've had people come to me about lots of things, but they've never come to me about that. So that's my 2 cents.
Corey.
Thank you. So I think we did have people come and talk about wanting to change the charter here back when we were going through what we're calling the perfect storm. And I think that probably most people, and this is anecdotal and from conversations that I had when this was going on, have no idea that that is how that there is a charter that is dictating how this process happens. So I think most people are assuming that in some way they are going to get to vote on who their counselors are and who their mayor is. And that's not, I don't know whether that's right or wrong. And we all know that a lot of folks get appointed to all sorts of elected positions, and that's how the process works in order for us to keep government going. But I think most people wouldn't even know to come and say what's in the charter. They just would say, as they were saying to me, when do I get to vote on the next mayor? And the answer is, well, you don't, because of this thing. So the other second thing I wanted to say was I appreciate the sort of wanting to have flexibility in it, but flexibility often really breeds inequity and it breeds self-selection. So the more we keep it so that, oh, well, we or future counselors will get to make the ultimate decisions, that takes it a little bit further out of the hands of folks. And I hear, because, well, this is what we were saying before too, that, well, we're elected, so we're elected to make these decisions. Maybe some decisions. And I don't know that if we have the opportunity to give folks a chance to weigh in, that's not the best decision to make, and that doesn't lean towards democracy. So that's what I have to say about that. Again, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in here and see if we can wrangle this back towards something. Excuse me, trying to get a taco down at the same time. So I think this is really interesting because you've got this, you really have a conversation about what you think our role is that is sort of going on. And I think it's kind of really cool that that's sort of an undertone about how you view elections, right? You know, what right, you know, how, you know, that we carry, you know, the public's will with us, because effectively, you know, as a group, we've had elections, and when do you weigh in and when do you not? I think it's a really interesting discussion. And I think it's really interesting that you've got kind of two poles about how you view that and how you tap into the public. Because ultimately what we want to do is we want to serve their will. I think if we think about all this conversation that, you know, we have, I think maybe if we just take a step back and kind of try to answer the question about what we're trying to solve, we can go through, right? We know do nothing's an option. And I hear very distinctly that having a special election within like 60 days, people are that's a little bit sort of soft when people sort of talk, right? So I think basically the question that we need to have is, we have kind of two paths that we need to go down, and maybe we don't have to work out the details, but if we can do nothing, and that would effectively leave the system in place that we have today done. We can look at what Medford does, which is provide some sort of process, and maybe it's less rigorous than Medford, maybe it's more rigorous, I don't know what that means, but kind of help govern the process for sort of future councils, and maybe use municipal code to address some of the concerns that people have brought up, or we can put out a wholesale charter amendment. I think the idea that forcing a special election no matter what is probably a disservice, right? Because we have a regularly scheduled set of elections. If we were going to do that, we would probably want to hit one of the places people are used to voting anyway, right? That's a pretty broad distinction. But what I want people to do is maybe just back up and kind of go, okay, don't worry about the details about what we put out there, but where are your head? Do you think, would you want to solve it through maybe address some of those concerns through municipal code? Or would you want to distinctly put out a charter, or sort of do nothing? Because we kind of have to we're trying to find our path forward here. Leonard?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Van Gordon. So I think you've you've delineated the options pretty well. I would like right now just to, for us as the council to take a step back right now and just send it out for public comment. I think we've got the public in a bit of a double bind here, as we usually do. I think, you know, we either don't hear from the public at all, in which case we think they don't care about it. And then sometimes we have people show up at the city council meetings and comment and say that they do want to change to the charter. And then we say, well, these are just a few loudmouths who don't really represent the public at large. And so I think that it's incumbent on us right now to send it out. I mean, to find out what the silent majority, so to speak, actually wants.
Okay. Anybody else have kind of an opinion? And again, I'm less worried about the details. I'm more like trying to firm up what kind of directions people want. I know that, Steve?
I haven't said anything. I've been listening to everybody. Everybody's got great ideas. Basically, I don't think it's that broken. It was a situation where everything happened at once, and the public was really involved politically in some other issues, which made them pretty passionate about what was going on. And I wanted to do a poll. I want to see what the people think, and I want us to talk about it. And hopefully we can tweak what we have now that will satisfy everybody. One thing that's always been in the back of my mind was Christine resigned in August. In May, we had a major election in which two candidates spent $100,000 campaigning for the mayor position. And then we had elections, Christine won it, but we forgot everything we went. That's how long they had to campaign for that election. So if we go through with something that's like 60 or 30 or 60 days for a new campaign for a new mayor, that's way short. And the expense. I don't want the city to spend that much money on a special election. I want to spend our money on other issues. I think it's an important issue, but if we don't have to spend it on a special election, I want on jobs and housing and stuff like that. That's it.
Joe?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. I appreciate your comments, and I didn't think about that other part as far as, you know, in reality, the feasibility of having a campaign in that short amount of time is somewhere short of impossible.
Mm-hmm.
But and plus, I don't think people would be able to get to know the candidates in enough time to be able to make an informed decision. So I agree with what you're saying there. I don't support at all a special election. They're expensive. I think it should go under the normal voting cycle, like I said before. And again, it's not a broken system. It's something maybe need a few tweaks. Maybe we should go with the Medford model a little bit and say, okay, under these parameters, I'm okay with that, because that's not a major deviation from what we're having. Although I got to say that if we start making these, putting these parameters up, and as Mary B said, we may find ourselves in a spot where it's more restrictive than where we're at. I really like to be able to say, okay, we don't have anybody here on council that's really interested in doing anything moving or whatever. Generally, when are we going to be filling under those circumstances in such a short time frame? It's just not going to happen. And if it does, okay, well then maybe we need to go back again. But it's happened once. It doesn't necessarily create a pattern. It was, I believe, an anomaly in history, and that we can move forward like we have in the past many, many years. So again, I don't support a special election. I think it should go on a regular election cycle. I don't think we should spend a bunch of money in regards to a poll. I think too that when Councillor Steer, my esteemed colleague, he didn't, he's talking about putting it out, and he himself said, well, the silent majority. So if you put it out, then what do we expect? Something out of the silent? They're not going to all of a sudden speak up. They're going to remain silent, which is going to skew what we're looking at in the first place. So I think that again, if it's not fit, it's not broke. I just don't see the huge need to fix it, and I don't believe it's broke. But I would look at something as far as someone wants to add some, as Mayor Van Gordon said, throw some guardrails up there, and as far as some of the decision making. I mean, I'm okay with looking at that. And if it makes sense, I can get behind that. But again, I'm not that excited about throwing out any type of special election. I'm not that excited about doing any major deviation from our charter that's been working really well. And I'm definitely not excited about spending money when, like Councilor Mo says, we've got a ton of things, a mile high list of things that we could spend it on instead of something like this.
All right, somebody else want to jump in and kind of talk about kind of where you're at? And again, trying to get a sense of why we kind of have to work towards someplace here. Corey?
Oh, okay. I was trying to lower my hand and make sure I was off mute, and it was just too much technology all at once. I also am not inclined to want to do a special election because they do cost a lot of money and would take a lot of coordination and organization. I am very intrigued by looking at the municipal code. As I said, I'm not clear as to where things go. And so I really appreciate Mary Bridget sharing that that's a place where we could put some of those parameters and some of those guidelines for future times. And the only thing that I would like to think, this is where it would be a charter amendment, is that we don't put any time parameters in terms of the appointment or the process needs to be done in 90 days or anything like that. We don't have that on there now. I'm not gonna like, it's not a hill that I'm gonna die on, but that's a piece that I think that maybe we should think about for future people too.
Marilee?
To clarify, municipal code policies and procedures are two separate documents. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct. Policy, think of the charter as your constitution, municipal code as a statute, and policy and procedures like an administrative rule.
Okay. So is it possible, if we had something we wanted to put into policies and procedures that could maybe clarify in writing or however, if it's not already there, that it isn't limited to council for a mayor replacement? Or, I mean, could those kind of things go in policies and procedures, or does that have to end up being in the municipal code? I'm just trying to clarify where something like that might fall, that would answer some of the questions maybe that people had.
Sure. I think my answer is, I think so. I've seen it in municipal code, but I can check around other jurisdictions. I think you can put in your policies and procedures however you want to work something. So I would say I would give that a qualified, yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so we could actually, even if we found out different, we could actually start with something in policies and procedures. And then if we found out we had to formalize it in the code, we could. But I'm just trying to think, there are certain things that maybe that cropped up that maybe would give people, as you know, the transparent information and a place to go to find it. And maybe policies and procedures or something like that might be a place to direct them, as opposed to going through all the processes of a poll and charter change and spending special election money and all that kind of thing. That might be a start.
Okay. Leonard?
Thanks. Well, let me just reiterate, I think the next step should be a survey of the public. But if we're looking for endpoints at this point, I think that what I would advocate is a special election outside of a certain length of time from the next election cycle, whether that's 6 months or 9 months or a year. I don't know. I mean, we can discuss that. But I would advocate for the most democratic solution, which in my mind is, while expensive, a special election.
Joe? You're still on mute, Joe.
I had the hand thing and now I forgot the microphone thing. Okay, so yeah, Corey's going, yep. So just so Mary B, I'm not sure if everybody, or maybe just clarify for me, but it's my understanding you referred to, and I think actually it was one of the best illustrations I've heard in a long time in regards to the The charter is like a constitution, and the policy procedures would be like, our codes would be similar to ORS, and policy procedures would be like org administrative rules. So there's a hierarchy. And that being said, is that the lower down that chain, so your ORS or your what we would call city codes can be more restrictive than the Constitution, so to speak. Laws can be made more restrictive, but they can never be made greater or allow more, be more permissive than what the Constitution or the Charter says. So if you codify anything, it's going to be narrowing down or less permissive than a charter. And so what I like, and I'm not sure if maybe I'm not understanding it correctly, but the charter is very permissive in regards to these type of decisions. And if we go to codify things, then we can't allow more than what the charter allows, but we can only be more restrictive than what the charter allows. And based on that, I don't know if, again, I don't think I would want to go down that road, because if the charter allows this much room, it's like what Councilor Steer was talking about, being the most open and the most allowing. I don't know if we want to restrict it more than what it is, because if we go down the other road of a codification, then it's going to restrict more than what we have. So I'm not sure I want to jump down that rabbit hole.
All right, Damien, I saw you pop back up. Do you have an opinion here about charter, nothing, or some sort of statute change?
Not necessarily. I mean, I want what the people want, but at the same time, if we're going to go that route, then we need to make sure that they understand the pluses and minuses of everything. And so that could be a little convoluted, but I mean, life is convoluted, man, so yeah, I mean, because I don't see anybody reading that whole document, but I also think that you can pare key points down to where it's a little bit more clear and concise for the general public. It's not saying that they can't understand it, but still, but yeah, I mean, so I'm kind of impartial. I mean, I want to go what people want, but then at the same time, I want them to know exactly what they're getting into, whether we stay with the same or whether we make a change. Because I think in some situations, the grass is green on the other side, but then in 4 years, are we going to be like, that didn't work, we're going to switch back? And honestly, I mean, even though this was a perfect storm, this could easily happen again. I mean, globalization is real. People move, people leave office, and I mean, who knows? There might be a chance where all of us or whoever's on council might end up leaving or being called to resign or whatever. And so how do we deal with it then? And so it'd be great if we get some all-encompassing that has primary, alternate, tertiary, quaternary routes to success, to where the people are happy, whatever that means. So I think public input is very important. Yeah.
So I'm going to try to sum this up and see if anybody doesn't throw something at me. So what I'm hearing is really there's some interest in maybe it is sort of pursuing maybe the Medford model, if you will. And that I hear some people saying, well, we don't want to go that far. I hear some people saying we don't, maybe we want a little bit more information to answer answer our questions, and whether or not it's in the policies and procedures to sort of outline our thinking, or if it's the actual statute. And I'm not hearing an interest that is to go down, I'm hearing some interest, but not a majority of the council really wanting to put a pole in the field and go down a charter amendment. I'm looking around, see. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I think you encapsulated it correctly. And again, I would absolutely have nothing against checking out what Medford's got and seeing what those options are. I think it'd be foolish to say I'm not interested in looking at anything. I would be happy to look at those things and provide an opinion based on, from my perspective, whether I can support those or not. So, don't misunderstand me. I'm willing to look at options, but again, I go into it looking at, okay, what we have here today is most inclusive that I can see. And I totally get what Councilor Pitts is saying is hey, we need to look at the options. We need to look at scenarios, and if it's already, if it's happened once, doesn't mean it can't happen again. So again, I just, I think that it would be incumbent upon us to look at those options, but I'm skeptical at this point.
All right, Leonard, and then we'll go to Mary Bridget.
So my understanding is that with the Medford model, the city council retains control over the process and controls on an individual case-by-case basis how the vacancy is going to be filled. Is that correct?
The Medford Code, Councilor Stair, just has some more detail about how the council appoints someone to fill a vacancy, in terms of they require many of the things that Springfield required, an interview and written application, but they do have a citizen committee and they have a nomination process for 25, you have to do similar to you do to an election. So it just has more details about the process. Okay, thanks. Well, with that, with that said, I would greatly value the public's input at this point. I would love to send out a survey as stipulated in the packet this afternoon. And if we don't do that, if we don't send out a survey, then I would advocate for a special election outside of a certain time frame. I have a suggestion to see if this would work for the councilors who are interested in doing a survey. If, because one thing we could do is just sort of take this incrementally in terms of provide you the information about similar to what Medford, or if there are other communities out there who have some more sideboards on how how a council would appoint someone to fill a vacancy. Because if maybe you see that information, that could help inform some of the questions on a poll. You know what I mean? Like that could kind of help about framing those issues up. Because what's critical with a poll is that you all are comfortable with the questions that are asked, so you can feel like you can really rely on it, I think. And so, if it works for you, the opportunity to do a poll, we have the information, if you give us the direction, we can move that forward. But maybe what we do in time is first get you this other information similar to what Medford does, and you can kick that around a little bit and evaluate that, and then see about moving forward then. Does that work? Or is that a possibility? So the poll could always go, the poll doesn't go away, but it just may not happen at the same time as you're evaluating the information.
Marilee.
Councilor Pitts made a comment that rang with me, and that was making sure that when you get information from the public, that they are coming from a informed position. As he was saying that, I was thinking back to a year ago, and I was thinking, okay, we had not everyone, but we had a certain group of people that were not as interested in the transparency of the process as they were in telling us what the process should be. So I think that we need to be careful when we do a poll, if and when we do a poll, that the information provided and the question asked clarifies, having somebody from an informed point of view. Because like I said, when I think back after he said that, I thought back at that and I thought, well, yeah, like I said, not everybody, but there was a certain group that was more interested in telling us what we were supposed to be doing than they were trying to figure out what we were trying to follow, the process and the charter that we were trying to follow. So I'm glad that Damien brought that up, because that's important, that if you're going to do a poll, it needs to be from a point of view that people have an informed knowledge.
All right, Joe, and then we'll see if we can wrap this one up.
Okay, so I'm confused. It sounded like Mary Bridget was advocating for a poll, and I didn't see a whole lot of interest in regards to a poll.
No,
Am I mistaking that?
No, so Joe, I think what I heard was hey, why don't I back up and get you the information about Medford, right? And
Right, I
then,
heard that.
And then if you got, because that's not going to inform a poll at all. And that if you guys look at the information from Medford and decide you want to do a poll, you can say, go forth and do. Did I get that right, Mary Bridget? So
Okay,
it's like you get some more information.
okay,
right?
okay.
And
Well,
then-
good. I get it now. I'm
Okay.
that relieves me. Sorry, Mary B, but I just want to make sure that it's like, it sounded like it was going sideways in my head. And of course, when that starts to happen, I start running for cover. So, okay, thank you.
Damien?
So I guess one thing I would want to see, whether we look at Medford or not, is look at other cities where the structure is same, in the sense that the councilors and the mayor aren't paid. Because I think that the way, if citizens know that if their taxpayer dollars are going towards any type of stipend or salary, I guarantee you that the way that they see things is going to be different. Now, I don't think any of us are doing this, for pay. Obviously, we're not doing it for pay, but I do see that being a large factor in other cities, because I think we're one of the few. And I'm curious to look at other cities that do not pay their mayor, their councilors, and see are their processes similar, because a stipend, especially that comes from taxpayer dollars, can make a huge difference in who even runs.
Okay, I can definitely look at that, and we can do some cross-referencing in terms of other jurisdictions and stipends and compensation and how they fill vacancies, no problem.
Joe?
That was actually incredibly insightful, Counselor Pitts, because it's come around before, and serious. And I'm not doing that just to saying that to make it feel good at all. It is simply, you're on the money, because that is important to see the different cities, and we have comparables for population. That's easy. We can do that on Google. What we need to look at is that, okay, so they have counselors and a mayor. How are those counselors and mayors themselves treated by the public, so to speak, or what's their expectations? Are they paid out of taxpayer dollars? Do they answer to their decisions because they're spending taxpayer dollars doing their job? And is there a different level of expectation of what the citizens want out of their counselors because they are getting paid? So no, I think that's really insightful. So, and that's come up before. And I completely concur, is that we need to get up to the year 2000, well, get out of 1958 and up to the year 2021, 22, and look at cities our size. There's cities smaller than us that pay their mayor and councilors. Our sister city across the river has paid their folks for many, many years. So it's a whole different dynamic. You get a whole different group of people, I think, or at least you get larger amounts of people that really want to be interested in becoming part of the voice. So if we're going to do any city charter, instead of this, I would rather look at it to see, okay, well, if we're going to do a city charter, then, or change, or even consider a change, that should be another topic that's a package deal. I totally agree. I think that's something we should look at.
Sorry, Joe. Marilee?
And added to that is how the elections are held. We have our sister city next door to us that elects according to ward, and only the ward votes for their counselor, whereas we're voted for citywide. That may make a difference too, but that's definitely a clarifying factor as well. When you start to look at some of the dynamics, that's a different dynamic in how ward counselors are selected and elected. So that if we're going to look at that should be one thing that's looked at as well.
Okay, so Mary Bridget, do you have enough direction here? So let's bring back the information about Medford, and then we can revisit a lot of this conversation.
Yes, I think I got it.
Okay, perfect. Really good discussion, folks. The one thing I would just offer, one last parting thought, is we're talking about sort of technical instruments of government, right? Like, whether or not it's statute, or whether or not it goes into a charter, whether or not it goes into our policy and procedures. I think that, you know, whatever we talk to voters, we really need to focus on the outcome, right? Like the technical, the how you do it, right? People just don't necessarily have a lot of experience with the technical part of government. Talk to them more about what our goals are, like what are we trying to achieve. And the last thing I would offer, I saw at the end of this, there's a lot of different ideas for charter amendments that are going around. It's going to take a little bit of time to put some of this stuff together. So it's going to move forward based on our direction, but it's not necessarily going to get done on Tuesday, right? So just be patient. We'll get there. All right. Thank you, Mary Bridget. Brian, I think you are up with the streetlight program.
Yes, I am, and glad to be here with you this evening. Operations Division is glad to make a presentation about streetlight condition and also the financing opportunities and also the contracting opportunities on how we can handle it. So I would like to start by introducing Scott Miller to you. He is our traffic operations engineer. He's an electrical engineer, and I have found him to be an outstanding guy after a year. Well, I knew that earlier, but very happy to have him on board, and he's going to participate in tonight's presentation. I have really 2 parts plus questions. Would prefer to do questions at the end so that we can move through our presentation at pace, but if it is your desire to ask questions throughout, then we will certainly be happy to respond. So we have an existing situation that I'm going to cover, and then Scott will talk about a prospective project. So for background, I'd like to indicate that we have about 4,500 lights. It's growing almost daily. About 3,000 or 70% of our system is low pressure sodium, high pressure sodium, or metal halide. Low pressure sodium dominates the legacy light portion of the system, and 30% are already LED. Some of that's new construction, downtown lighting replacement, and also the biggest factor is the low pressure sodium light fixtures are failing at very, very high rates, both the lamp inside and also the rest of the components. You probably have seen some of those low pressure sodium lights wrapped in electrician's tape, and that's keeping the lens on. So that's an indication of the overall condition. Sub is replacing those low pressure sodium lights with LED lights as those failures occur, and that is creating a financial strain on us. So let me continue on. Springfield Utility Board maintains all of the city-owned streetlight assets, and we have the legacy lights, the high-pressure sodium metal halide. They're still a valid lighting source. They have about a 4 to 5 year lifespan on just the light bulbs themselves, and so they require frequent light maintenance. LPS replacement parts are really very much either hard or impossible to get. They are a legacy type of technology that is not being used in many parts in the world. In fact, Philips, which was the major manufacturer of low pressure sodium lamps, exited the market about 4 or 5 years ago. And so it's been 2nd tier and 3rd tier manufacturers making that product. So it's very expensive to try and get that product. We also are relying on our citizens to report outages, and that leads to longer repair times. Sometimes citizens don't choose to report, and we no longer are doing our quarterly surveys. That was an activity that was cut due to budget reasons many years ago. So this leads us to having both physical and financial needs. So I'd like to show you a cost breakdown of our prior year, fiscal year. The first 2 bullet points are our regular energy and operations and maintenance cost on an annual basis. Those, the energy bill is constrained by the rates that Sub announces each year, and our energy rate is basically equivalent to the General Service 1 schedule that they have, which is for commercial users. And then our operations and maintenance charge is a monthly rate by fixture type. So low pressure sodium pays one rate, LED pays a different rate based on the actual cost of that maintenance within limits. Our maintenance bill can go up 5% per year per the existing intergovernmental agreement with SUB. As a result of that, it leads to the third bullet, where we have a significant deficit that we've been paying separately and apart so that we do not have that deficit continue to grow. And there's a correction on the slide there. We no longer have a $125,000 remaining deficit. We actually have a $305,000 deficit as of June 30th, 2021. We have been trying to make payments against that deficit at end of year when there are street funds available. And so that has tried to whittle that down, but that deficit will continue to grow because the cost of maintenance is exceeding the authorized amount that we can pay them because of the IGA's 5% annual increase limit. The city also purchases repair materials and we contract for repairs. That can be anything from a light pole that gets knocked down in a collision. And so then we do that work to restore that light. It also includes the kind of work where we have many decorative fixtures in some of our older neighborhoods and some of our not that old neighborhoods that were low quality fixtures, and those fixtures are pretty much unusable. And so we need to replace those fixtures outright. So that's part of that $43,000 and $103,000 cost. So our total fiscal year 2021 cost was $650,000. Now I will make note here before I turn the page is that right now, if we were to replace our system fully, we would be able to save about $15,000 per month on bullet number 1 and bullet number 2. We still would have the deficit to extinguish, and then we also would have the ongoing repair of knockdowns, which would be much less than the cost that we're currently dealing with. So our current operational challenges are physical needs on the first 3 bullets, citizens reporting outages, timeliness of repairs, and the increasing frequency of those needed repairs because the infrastructure is degrading and is at end of useful life in some situations. Timeliness, I want to make a special point to note that we have numerous examples where repairs have taken several years because of budget limitations. For example, John Hammer has a commercial subdivision just to the west of 42nd Street. And in that subdivision, there was theft of wire, there was damage to poles, and there was destruction of the fixtures. Mr. Hammer has been requesting repair of that for at least 5 years. And we made a special effort just recently to put that under contract, and so that will be taken care of. But I'm not at all happy with having an entire subdivision out of light for 5 years. But our budget constraints required that. We also have in a neighborhood called River Glen, north of Hayden Bridge Road, there's some of those older low quality decorative fixtures that I mentioned previously. Those have gotten to the point where they have failed due to leakage. Water gets in them because of the deteriorating globes. We've replaced them with some just screw in LED kits, but they continue to fail. And so we're working with that neighborhood to try and see if they are able to help us out a little bit, and we're going to try and get that taken care of. But that's 2 examples of situations where it's taken quite a long time to do any work. We have not yet done River Glen, but we're about ready to launch that. We have had extensive wire theft over the years, and we have not yet been able to replace all of the wire that has been stolen as of yet. So let me move on to the other 3 bullets there. We have increasing operating and maintenance cost, increasing energy cost. The rate of energy, of course, is going up. And then also just the total number of lights that we have is increasing. So both of those increase on that basis. I mentioned low pressure sodium unavailability. So I'll move on from that. So what is our current strategy? Our current strategy is simply replace the low pressure sodium fixtures with LEDs as they fail. Sub is doing that work for us. And we are doing the occasional fixture replacement of decoratives when those fixtures are failing. So we're quite candidly, we're falling a bit behind in how we're managing the system, but that has a opportunity here for us, and that would be, what are the advantages of LEDs? I think many of you are probably familiar with that, so I'm not going to belabor this. They use a lot less energy, and they even use less maintenance over their 20-year life cycle. We can also do a better level of lighting, promoting traffic safety, and also security in neighborhoods. We oftentimes get citizens asking us for an improved light level or a repair of a light because they perceive that there's a problem with either vandalism or car prowls or burglary. And so they really like to see their lights restored. There's also a wider range of colors available with LEDs, from bright white and to warm yellow. The warm yellow is kind of like our low pressure sodium. I'm not a real fan because there's not a great deal of actual eye to object visibility under that kind of light. So we have pretty much standardized on one kind of medium type of light, and it seems to be working pretty well on the LEDs. We also plan to be able to incorporate lighting controls that allow a remote control from my desktop. I could turn a light on, turn it off. I could change the output. What's most exciting is that the controls will allow us to have automatic error reporting, and we would be able to dispatch repair much more quickly and without the citizens even needing to make contact with us. We can also meter the energy use, and because we're metering, then we would choose to do some dimming and trimming, and Scott will cover what that means a little bit more later on. And then we would, okay, so I hit the last bullet out of sequence there. So I would direct you also to look at, we're not going to look at it here on screen, but just be reminded that in the council briefing memorandum is an example of the services that an energy service company could provide. And also there's an analysis of the city system that relates somewhat to the financial aspect that we discussed a moment ago. And should we go forward with an energy services company at the conclusion of today's meeting, we would select that energy services company via an RFP or RFQ, request for proposals or quotes. So now I've gone over what the problems are. Now I'd like to hand it off to Scott, and he can tell us what the solution might be. And then we will ask for some direction at the end.
Hi, good evening, Mayor and councilors. So I'm going to go pretty quickly through this part to save a little bit of time for questions at the end. You have, you can see before you a nice graphic. This is not from Springfield, but it's kind of representative of what this type of lighting upgrade could look like. And you can see, the existing LED lights that we already have in the city in a lot of places, downtown, and any of the new developments that we have tend to look more like the lighting on the right and less like the lighting on the left. So we're really excited about this opportunity. But one of the best things about it is kind of the fact that the project essentially pays for itself. So I'll explain that here in just a minute. So we have an opportunity to, well, I guess I shouldn't say an opportunity. We have a need to upgrade all of our non-LED fixtures to LED. There's a few different ways we could go about doing that. We looked in detail at kind of three different options. One would be continuing the ad hoc status quo sort of replacement that we're doing now, but that could be expanded to include the other legacy fixtures. Another option would be to do a conventional design bid build sort of process. Both of those options can take quite a long time. And as Brian mentioned, it's actually costing us about $15,000 a month or $180,000 a year to keep going down the path that we're going with the legacy fixtures. So really, the faster that we can implement a solution, the sooner we can start saving that money. So an ESCO or an energy services company is basically the fastest way to do it. It would be essentially bring on a company. An ESCO is a pre-authorized, pre-vetted by the state of Oregon to deliver energy savings performance contracts. And those are, it's essentially a special part of the state law that kind of is in between a normal design build sort of thing and a construction project. And so it would allow us kind of all in one shot to put out a request for proposals and then hire an energy services company. So that company would, but before they do anything else, they would audit our entire infrastructure. And using that audit would then come up with a maximum project cost. So they're legally required to guarantee us a certain level of savings. And then they do it very conservatively so that ideally we can save even more than that. So I'll show you a slide here next with sort of a project cost timeline. And these are conservative estimates. Keep in mind, we haven't done the audit yet. So it's based on what we believe our existing inventory is, and that will change somewhat when the audit is performed. In terms of paying for the project, there's various different options to do that. There can be, a loan from a local bank, or we could choose to finance it ourselves. We will also look at any sort of grants that might be available or credits. There may be ARPA funding that might possibly be available to fund a project like this. Even if we don't have those grants or additional monies, it's still a financially beneficial project for us to pursue regardless. Because even without those grants, basically the grants just make it so that we're saving money earlier on in the payback period.
Hey, Scott, we're running a little bit
Yes,
late
sir.
on time. So could you flip maybe to the savings slide and see if, and we can open this up for some comments?
Sure, absolutely. So this is actually the last slide I have right here. It's just an example of kind of what the cost picture could look like. So the blue line on top is kind of our current baseline cost. So if we don't do anything, that's kind of what our cost would look like, and projecting an increase year over year due to inflation and energy costs and maintenance costs. And then the blue bars on the bottom are a post-implementation cost, and then everything in between. So it starts out as light blue and then it turns into the brownish color. That's the light blue is essentially paying back the project cost, and then the brown is savings. So once you get to the end of life of these fixtures, about the 20-year mark, you're looking at potentially saving $2 to $3 million over if we just maintained our existing system. So that's all I have for slides. So thank you for pushing me along there, and I'll turn it back to Brian really quick.
How about Joe? Brian, do you have anything to add before we open it up here?
No, sir.
All right, Councilor Piscineri.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. You realize that in 2004 is the reason why I ran for council, because of the low pressure sodium lights that were present on Main Street, and that there was a meeting in 2005 in regards to doing this very same thing and getting out of switching over to lights, and how much money that would be saved going to the high pressure versus the low pressure lights. So this whole thing is, anyway, so big history here. And I am very excited at the thought of seeing how far we can toss those bulbs and lights out of the city. I'm so for this, very excited. I want to get right down here to some of the probably follow up for me to get that information to me instead of burning so much time. But I'm going to give you kind of some questions, and I'd love to have some background, because I want to support you and I want to support this project. Okay. So don't look at it as me trying to torpedo anything. I'm excited. Okay. So I want to look at the sub costs that we're getting charged, and plus we don't have any choice or anything to do with the rates, but I'm very interested to see what our maintenance fees we're paying them, and if there is any private sector that we would be permitted by whatever constraints we may or may not have. I want that. We have a duty to look at what private businesses can be doing that service for us, because if we own the equipment, then we have every right to choose who works on that equipment, I believe. So let us know about that in regards to, is there a cost savings potential there? On those the costs that we're so far behind, I guess that would just be made up by way of savings if we're shifting over to the LEDs. So I'm really kind of shocked and kind of dismally shocked in regards to owing on $305,000 that we're behind. That's totally no good. Is now that Hammer property slash, I know which fixtures you're talking about. It's the big globes with the ornate stems. But are you talking about the replacement clear back on the old one mile pathway on 42nd? Is that not a Willamette Lane facility now? And are they partnering with us in regards to that, or paying their fair share in regards to the lighting on that? Or is that just going to go away and we're going to remove everything out of there?
It is a city facility and we would need to repair it.
Okay. And right on top of that then is that what type of, we already know what can happen there. We already know they're going to strip lights or strip the wires out of there. So I can't support replacing those unless we have found a way to mitigate that, and if it's effective. Otherwise, there's no point in putting it in there. But if we can mitigate that, then the quicker we can put them in there, the better, as far as I'm concerned. So I'd be interested to see how that's getting mitigated. And also we're coming to the remote access cost. I want to see the cost benefit for that. It would be a great tool and it would be fun, but is it really the cost benefit balance out? Is there, is it something where with these lights, with the great engineering they have and the less likelihood to go out, et cetera, do we need that, as far as being told, hey, this light's out? So I'd like to have a little more background in regards to that remote access and the justification, unless it's very inexpensive. But if it's expensive, then I'd want to take a look at that. And then I totally agree with and support that. I think it's our responsibility to use the RFP process whenever possible, instead of going to a straight, I know you're looking at McKinstry and et cetera. So, but I want to give other companies the shot at doing the work. We may be able to get a better price for it. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that ESCO, I didn't know about the ESCO, which is pretty great to have that type of background or a back door for us. So is ESCO a company, or is it different companies or a type of company? I wasn't quite sure what you're saying there, but if it's different companies, then of course, then I would want to see an RFP process for that as well. I know that's a ton, but it's something, it's a great topic. I really enjoy it. And it's very important for the city, because appearance is everything and safety is everything. And I'm really excited to get some of our darker neighborhoods lit up, because the car prowls or car clouts are getting very prevalent and a big issue.
Okay, Brian or Scott, do you want to take a shot at some of his multi-part question?
Yeah, given the time frame, I would just request that we would be able to reply independently. We will obviously give every member of the council the information, but let's use a communication packet or something similar.
Very good. Leonard, and then we'll go to Steve.
Yeah, I can make this real quick. I like the strategy of replacing the sodium lamps with the LEDs. I think it makes sense, and as fast as the sodium lamps are burning out, I don't think that it's going to be a significant difference from just going ahead and preemptively replacing them all. The one thing that I like better about the sodium lamps, just from an aesthetic standpoint, is the warm yellow light. I like the warm yellow light. I think it's prettier. So that's my vote.
Well, I'm glad Joe and you are on opposite sides of the city. He hates the warm yellow light. All right, Steve.
Okay, there's no time for me to ask my questions, but I do have a lot of questions. And quite frankly, I have a lot of arguments against doing this program, but I will put them in writing and we'll talk about it later. Thank you.
Can you make sure, can you make sure you send the questions to the staff? So we may have
Yeah.
to find a little bit more time in the next.
I've got
couple weeks.
to write them out and I'll get them to you. Thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry. I'd definitely like to hear what questions you have, Steve, for sure.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Anybody else? All right, so it sounds like we're probably going to need a little bit more time with this. One question I did have was when you look at the third-party vendor, and I looked at this when I looked at the slide for total savings in the payoff period. Does it, when you look at the cost associated to it, does it actually benefit us a little bit more to sort of front load that with one-time cost? Like, so if we came up with the money and did the whole project now, right? Like, what would the savings difference be?
It would be everything under that curve. That's in light blue. All of that light blue is debt service. So if you pay for the project up front, then that is no longer debt service. That's automatically savings to the street fund.
Okay, so I think my question is, Nancy, I think we're gonna have to find a little bit more time to kind of get to an answer. I think we definitely want to pursue this, right? And I think it's a matter of the how, and especially with consideration about how we're using those relief funds. I know this project was on that list, and it may be some combination of that, like all in the relief funds, or all through this third-party vendor.
Okay, we will follow up with that in our discussion regarding those funds.
Perfect. All right. Anything else, Brian or Scott?
Thank you very much. We appreciate the input and look forward to our next discussion.
I am going to adjourn this, and we will be back in 3 minutes on this very channel. So stay tuned. We are adjourned.
See you in a minute.
You there, Pish? We'll give him another minute. AJ, are you ready to go?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to call the Springfield City Council regular session to order with roll call.
Mayor Van Gordon,
Here.
Councilor Pitts,
Here.
Councilor Mo. Councilor Mo, you're muted.
Okay, here, sorry.
Councilor Rodley.
Here.
Councilor Stair,
Here.
Councilor Woodrow,
Here.
and Councilor Pictionary.
I'm here.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
of the United
of
States,
the United States of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one nation, under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and justice
for all.
for all.
As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us online to please keep yourself on mute until you are called on to provide public testimony. There will be 2 times this evening designated as public testimony and will be listed as public hearings and business from the audience on the agenda. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak during that time, please use the raise hand feature when the agenda item is called. When we call on you, please state your name, ward, and our general location for the record. First item, please.
Mayor, the first item is the consent calendar.
Ready?
I'm ready, Steve.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and it's been seconded by Councilor Pictionary. Neil, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Councilor Pitts,
Aye.
Councilor Mo,
Here, yes.
Councilor Rodley,
Yes.
Councilor Stair,
Aye.
Councilor Woodrow,
Yes.
and Councilor Pictionary.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes 6-0. Next item, please.
Mayor, the next item is public hearings. You have 1 public hearing this evening. Public hearing number 1, annexation of territory to the city of Springfield, annex 0.4 acres of property located at 186 Deadman Ferry Road, assessors map 17-03-14-00, tax lot 1,500, and a portion of the Deadman Ferry public right-of-way abutting the property. This is ordinance number 2, an ordinance annexing certain territory addressed as 186 Deadman Ferry Road, assessors map 17-03-14-00, tax lot 1500, and a portion of the Deadman Ferry public right-of-way abutting the subject property to the city of Springfield and Willamette Park and Recreation District, withdrawing the same territory from the Rainbow Water and Fire District, adopting a severability clause, and providing an effective date. This is a second reading, and Melissa Carino is here for the staff report.
Thanks, Neil. Greetings, Mayor and City Councilors. This is the second reading for this annexation application. On September 7th, the council continued the hearing and held the record open until today. No additional testimony has been received by staff. At the first reading, there were still some unresolved issues. 1, confirmation of availability and capacity for sub-services, and 2, finalizing the annexation agreement. Now that the issues have been resolved, I would like to go through the 4 approval criteria for annexations again, listed in the Springfield Development Code section 5.7-140, and go over how the proposal meets these criteria. 1, the subject territory is contiguous to city limits along the western boundary. International Way is already in city limits. 2, policies from both the city's Metro Plan and the 2030 Comprehensive Plan's urbanization element are met through this application. The subject territory is within the city's urban growth boundary, otherwise known as the UGB, and is currently covered by the urbanizable fringe overlay. 3, if annexation is approved, the subject territory can as easily obtain key facilities and services from Deadman Ferry Road, just south of the site. Again, these facilities and services will include sanitary sewer connection, sub-water and electric service, fire protection services from Eugene Springfield Fire Department, police services from Springfield Police, and Willamette Lane Parks and Recreation District. And the final criteria is about the annexation agreement. So an annexation agreement is included in the second reading packet tonight. The agreement covers obligations for the applicant and for the city, including any financial responsibilities. The applicant has already signed the agreement, and if the annexation is approved by City Council, the agreement will be ready to be signed and executed by the city. The agreement would then be recorded with Lane County. Because all applicable annexation criteria have been met, and annexation will help facilitate full street improvements in this neighborhood when future development happens, as well as bring this property into city limits, staff recommends the council approve this application. Thank you, councilors. I'm here for any questions you may have. I believe the applicants are also in attendance if you have questions for them.
All right, so Mary Bridget, with the public hearing still open, do I need to solicit additional comment from the public here?
Yes, we'll go ahead and ask if there's anybody wanting to testify, and then you can move forward and close the hearing.
Okay, perfect. So if anybody wants to testify to this matter, please raise your hand in the chat and Neil will invite you up.
Mayor, I'm not seeing anyone with a raised hand at this point.
I am not either. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and then turn it back over to council for any deliberations or additional questions. Steve?
I don't know how to turn my microphone off. I don't know how to turn on. We don't make a decision tonight, do we?
That's correct, Councilor Mo. No decision tonight.
Okay, that's okay.
Sorry to interrupt there. Sorry to jump in. This is a continuation of the public hearing and a second reading. No action requested.
Okay.
Joe?
Just a quick comment. I looked at this packet and I appreciate all the work you put into that. It's very clear and it's a good job. That's all.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments? It is very good. Then it is no action required. So I think we're ready to move to the next item. Next item, please.
Mayor, the next item is business from the audience.
All right. If you have business for us, please raise your hand and then Neil will invite you up.
Mayor, we have a few hands going up, or a couple of hands. Just a reminder, we have 36 attendees in the audience today. Our first speaker is Elizabeth Utterbeck, followed by Amy Cothron. Elizabeth, you should be able to unmute your microphone on your side.
Thank you. I'm unmuted. I hope you can hear me.
You can.
Okay. This is Lizzie Utterbeck from Ward 3. I was listening to the work session this evening, and I find it interesting how much you don't want to spend money on a special election, but you'll shell it out for lawsuits for harmful and deadly policing, exorbitant liability insurance as a result of these lawsuits, and for police toys without batting an eye. For example, I've seen some hefty policing expenditures in the consent calendar tonight included that you approve without even discussing. So when you say you're trying to be fiscally responsible, I don't automatically accept that. You know, SPD's budget keeps rising, yet the city apparently doesn't have the funds to replace streetlights. Things aren't adding up. I also found it interesting when Councilor Woodrow stated tonight that you've all been elected to represent us, but that isn't exactly true. Currently, there are at least 2 of you that were not elected. And I do recall, if I recall correctly, Mayor Van Gordon was first appointed as a councilor and then appointed as mayor. So there's a concerning domino effect with these appointments. Moreover, Councilor Piscineri says the system isn't broken, but how are you measuring that? I actually didn't want to talk about the charter, but I really didn't like how you handled the mayoral appointment. So of course I had to throw in my 2 cents about this, which is hard to do, especially after I listened to you say that you think of commenters as uninformed and potentially as loudmouths. Anyways, what I wanted to comment on tonight is some of the comments at the last meeting. I heard Mayor Van Gordon encourage us to trust you, to trust that you are working on policing and taking care of it. I just want you to understand that when I hear that, I cringe. I cringe because lives have been lost. I cringe because it took a settlement to mandate better policing in Springfield. I cringe because you regurgitate mandates from the settlement back to us as if those changes were your idea, as if you had a choice about whether or not to implement those changes. I want you to know that I noticed that. So my question for council tonight is, how do you plan to continue to improve policing without being forced to as a result of a lawsuit and mandated reforms? Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Mayor, the next speaker is Amy Cawthron, followed by Ann Deal Brown. Amy, you should be able to unmute the microphone from your side.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Cawthron, formerly of Ward 5, but thankfully no longer a Springfield resident. Tonight, I'm going to talk about something that's not quite as near and dear to your heart of, as near and dear to your heart as high pressure or low pressure sodium lights. I am talking to you in reference to a police complaint that I filed earlier this year. At the back end of it, I had realized, based on what the officer who had conducted the original investigation, that he had lied in a report. I forwarded an email showing this lie. I forwarded a video illustrating that what he had said was indeed a lie. And none of you thought it was worth your time, thought it was worth any type of effort to get back to me concerning an officer clearly and blatantly lying on a report. An action which, might I remind you, got the last chief of police in a point where he resigned from his position because of it. So I just want to know from each one of you why you're fine with police officers faking information on reports, and I will see the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I think we're ready for the next person.
Mayor, the next person we have is Ann Deal Brown, and we don't have any other hands at this point. So Ann Deal, you should be able to unmute the microphone on your side.
Hello, can you all hear me?
We can.
Hi, my name is Andy L. Brown. I am in Ward 1, and I want to speak to you all about generally the relations between the city of Springfield and its non-white residents. As we've seen in the last year and some months, there has been a lot of civil unrest, and my fear is that if things aren't changed, that it will just take the next event to spark another issue and incident, because there are some underlying issues that obviously have not been addressed and or resolved and fixed. So I would like for something to be done so that this relationship can be repaired, and that the community as it stands definitely is divided, and that is a problem. The city of Springfield, in my estimation, cannot be a great city with that continuing. I definitely feel as though we can come up with solutions and strategies to make it a more inclusive, more communal city that will support and uplift every one of its members. But I know that from many conversations that I've had with many different citizens of many different ethnic backgrounds, that there is definitely a feeling of unwelcomeness for many different reasons. But we definitely, I feel that we should have a conversation and find a solution to these issues. And I am definitely open for having that conversation and assisting in any way that I can. And that's all I have. I see the rest of my time.
Mayor, it appears those are all the hands we have up at this point.
All right. Does anybody want to make any council response? Leonard?
Thank you, Mayor Van Gordon. I just want to thank all the speakers for coming out to speak tonight. Lizzie Utterbeck and Amy Cothran, and especially Andy L. Brown, who I don't think we've heard from before. I want to say that your words are definitely not falling on deaf ears tonight. And I also want to say that the very unfortunate incidents that have brought these lawsuits down on the city of Springfield have also not gone unheeded by the council, and I'm hopeful that it's not, that they're not going unheeded by the PD either. I am very grateful to the Kenny family as part of their settlement making a use of force policy review part of the settlement, and that the reform of the use of force in Springfield has resulted from that. I'm also hopeful that some of the, if there is an adverse ruling from some of the other litigation against us, that we'll learn from that too, without any further comment on those. Anyway, I'm very grateful to the public for coming out on a weekly basis and speaking to us. And I want to encourage everybody in the public who is speaking to continue. And anybody who's out there listening to this meeting tonight who has an opinion to please come out and state it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? All right, next item, please. All right, Damian, we'll come back to Damian.
Well, once again, thank you all for commenting. And I just want to commend Andy L. Brown for speaking up. I know that, I mean, at least since I've been on council, I haven't heard his voice, and I'm really glad that we have other voices. And I will say that I think that many of us are very open. But one thing that I've seen is that when we say we're open, it's not an actual conversation, it's a chastisement. And granted, I get real thick skin, but you're not going to talk to me. And I'm not talking about you, anybody else specific, but I don't allow anybody to talk to me like I'm some child. And so we need to get to a point where we can be civil to each other, but then also we need to get to a point where we don't have the same people speaking for other people. I mean, you have, and I've mentioned this before, the word ally is thrown around so much in the state of Oregon, and sometimes the loudest voices are those who actually aren't even going through it. Not all the time, but a lot of times. And so I would love to see those people, those minoritized individuals come to council, reach out to us. That way we can talk to them directly versus second and third hand information. And so, like I said, and I think many of us are pretty open and transparent, but we are in a pandemic. And so meeting all the time in person is probably not going to happen. And I need people to give us just a pinch of grace. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Very good. Next item, please.
Mayor, the next item is ordinances. You have one item under ordinances tonight. Item number 1, a request for a metro plan diagram amendment and zone change for 1.14 acres of property located at the northwest corner of Marcola Road and 28th Street. This is ordinance number 3, an ordinance amending the Eugene Springfield Metropolitan Area General Plan, or the Metro Plan diagram, by redesignating approximately 1.14 acres of land from medium density residential MDR to commercial C, concurrently amending the Springfield zoning map by rezoning the same approximately 1.14 acres of land from MDR to community commercial CC, adopting a severability clause and providing an effective date. This is the second reading, and Andy Limbert is here for the staff report.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. At the conclusion of the public hearing meeting on September 7th, my understanding is that councilors still had questions related to some of the information that was presented through the applicant's transportation study. Unfortunately, personally, I was called out of town for family reasons, and so I was unable to respond, but I believe that information was conveyed to counselors making the inquiries. And so staff's request is either to confirm that all questions have been satisfactorily addressed through the information in the record, or alternatively, if there are still questions unanswered, to allow staff to address those by reopening the public hearing and also allowing the applicant to provide any supplementary information that might be necessary to answer any questions that council might still have. It was questions that came after staff's direct involvement with the hearing on September 7th. So I was not party to all of the communications between, I believe it was the city attorney's office and counselors that were making inquiries. So I'm here to answer any questions, and I guess I would defer to our counsel, legal counsel, for protocol should there be a need to reopen the public hearing.
All right, Corey.
Thank you. I was one of those troublemakers. Maybe I was the only one of those troublemakers, and you're just being super diplomatic. But I just want to say that yes, all of the questions that I had were answered. And additionally, I went, because the Marcola Meadows and that corner is in my ward. And I also went there twice and got out and wandered around to make sure that I had a good understanding of what was in the transportation plan. Because as some of you may recall, my concerns are just the increased use and what's happening there traffic wise. But I did get my questions answered, so no need to reopen and derail. And I just want to really appreciate that staff were so responsive and gave me what it was that I needed so that I could get up to speed on it. Because we do want walkable neighborhoods, and we do want to improve the transportation, and we do need housing. So thank you.
I'd just like to state from staff's perspective, it is no trouble. And certainly there's every opportunity to address questions, whether through normal channels or through the public hearing process. It's staff's intent to have council completely satisfied with their decision and fully informed.
Marilee.
I just had a question. The questions that Corey asked was she the only person that got the responses? The communication of the responses?
I
Because sometimes
believe so.
somebody asks a question, we're interested in the answers. And so it would be helpful if we all received the information. I'm not sure that happened. I don't remember seeing it, but it could have been my fault too. So I'm just checking.
Councilor Woodrow, I can help answer that question. There were questions about the transportation system plan, and those were just given to Councilor Rodley. I don't think they went out to the whole council.
Okay. I just, sometimes that questions come up and it isn't just the individual that asked the question that's interested in the answers. So.
Sure, we could, if you could give me a second, I might be able to, Christina's listening in and she's the one who had that conversation and she might be able to give a summary here if you just hold on a second. Neil, is it possible to make Christina a panelist and then she can put it in that, it's information that's already in the record. She could just give a little summary.
She's already being pulled up. Thank you.
Great.
And I just need to switch tabs to get to that, get to the right place where I sent the email. Okay, so first it was a link to the transportation system plan, which is in the record. And that was, and then also the background information, which I think is already reflected in the record or in the legislative history of the council, that the TSP, the Transportation System Plan, was developed when the subject property was previously zoned for commercial mixed use. And it includes Project R28, which was originally planned to serve a mixed use commercial area before that area was changed to residential in 2021, and then before this request to change it back to commercial again. So essentially the planned projects that are in the plans, and those planned projects haven't been changed in the TSP, reflected an earlier commercial zoning that we're not going back to an identical version of, but similar. And then I also provided follow-up information about the step that is required to follow this. It's a condition of approval on the zone change, which is to amend the Marcola Meadows master plan to reflect the change of zoning in the master plan. And the master plan modification includes criteria of approval that specifically get at transportation system capacity and parking and ingress and egress. So those criteria would be applied at the level of modifying the master plan to the extent that the master plan doesn't already capture those items with the previously planned and zoned residential use. My understanding was that the requirement will be that it will continue to reflect things that were in there that would accommodate transportation capacity, but that's a condition of approval on your decision, recommended condition of approval for your decision tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I have noted that really good feedback about providing the response next time to the entire council, because I wasn't really sure if other people had similar questions.
Sometimes we nod in silence when somebody asks a question, so.
Yes.
All right, any other questions? All right, Steve, I think
Ready?
you're up.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 3. Got the right one, yep. Yes.
Second.
All right, it has been moved by Councilor Moe and seconded by Councilor Pictionary. Neil, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, Councilor Pitts.
Aye.
Councilor Moe.
Yes.
Councilor Rodley.
Yes.
Councilor Stair.
Aye.
Councilor Woodrow.
Yes.
And Councilor Pictionary.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes 6-0. Next item, please.
Next item is any business from the city council.
Yes. I
All
do.
right, Steve?
I've got about 4 things here I've saved up, and it'll only take me a couple of minutes. First one is, since a year, I've been trying to help change our police culture, and that's just a simple word for I want to make things better. But another thing was our appearance. And I suggested a year ago that we change our police car colors. Black is like a SWAT team, and it sends a bad message. And in our purchases today, they changed the colors to silver. I hope my suggestion helped make that happen, but I love that direction. And that was the right thing to do as far as I'm concerned. So thank you. Now, going on. There was a reported police vehicle crash into a tree. You know, I don't know much about that, but I've been asked about it. And can I get any information about the incident? And is there any dash cam footage available yet or some way to look at that incident? And that's all I have there. Going on, West D Street. There's a lot of discussion of dealing with the interaction of bike traffic and remodeling of West D Street. I've got arthritis in my thumb. It's hard for me to write. It's hard for me to read my writing, by the way, you guys. So I'll go back and dealing with the increase in bike traffic and the redesign of West 11th. That is in a process right now. In the meantime, the car traffic is increasing and lots of bikes. But the speeding of cars is a big problem. In a presentation some months ago, staff showed a profile of a traffic slowing speed bump. I'm not talking about the big ones because they cause anger in me, but gentler style that encourages traffic slowing. What can be done to add a couple of those and stripe them as crosswalks? It'll be changed later, but for the time being. So one other question. There's been a request to find ways to slow traffic on Summit Drive going up Kelly Butte. It's a curvy road, no sidewalks, so people walk in the street. I live up there and they do speed by. One last thing here. I've mentioned many times the fatalities at Franklin Boulevard in front of Mermel's. The past few years, I've seen 6 to 8 deaths. The curve going towards Eugene has some warning signs. I'm not sure how good they were, but they helped. If they helped a little, a life was saved. The last couple of car crashes, some of them were motorcycles, have wiped out those warning signs. They laid on the ground for a while and then disappeared and not replaced. I can go on with some other things, but what can be done to look at the situation? I know we're going to get infrastructure sometime and Franklin Boulevard is going to be rebuilt, but in the meantime, people are still losing their lives and their precious. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Anybody else? So, and I guess I have maybe 2 comments, and then Nancy, if maybe you can talk more specifically to Steve's question. So when I hear Steve sort of describe kind of some of the infrastructure issues that we're having, and I know we've kind of talked about some of this long term when we talked about where the Biden money and sort of building sort of capability to start getting some of these addressed. Yeah. Could you talk about, is something happening out at that portion of that, not phase 1 of Glenwood, but like Steve's right about that corner out that's further up Glenwood. Are we involved in that in any way? What's going on out there?
I would need to check on that. Neil, Neil is our contact with Public Works. I don't know if you have any update on that particular area. I know we are aware of it. And certainly signs are not a difficult thing to do. I just don't know if it's already in the project queue.
Yeah, so the Franklin Boulevard area, as you know, is extremely dangerous. There are utility poles that are not undergrounded, and I think that's mostly what folks are often hitting when they are driving on that road. And so it is a concern. We do have a list that our Development and Public Works Department has put together of recent incidents so we can track them. And I will talk to folks tomorrow and see if there is something in the works. I know it's part of potentially phase 2 of Franklin Boulevard. I think it goes down that far, but yeah, you are correct, Councilor Mo. It is an unfortunate. All of Main Street into Franklin Boulevard is a relatively dangerous corridor. So there is quite a bit of safety improvements going on, both on Main Street with Councilor Woodrow and the mayor working on a lot of those safety improvements, and also in Glenwood.
Oh, I know that. And I was going to say something. I've seen 17 fatalities at that corner over the years. And They're human lives and they're precious, but they're all vehicle fatalities, no pedestrians. So it has not become very important to the public. And like I said, they're still precious. But I know Franklin Boulevard is going to be rebuilt. Infrastructure money, I hope, is going to do it. But that's going to be a few years down the road. In the meantime, I hope that maybe we can get some signs up there and help maybe save a few lives in the meantime. That would help.
That we can do.
Very good. One other comment I would like to make is the Main Street facility plan. I saw the email come out from Public Works that the draft plan is available. It is open for public comment right now. We've worked on Main Street for a very, very long time, and this would be the blueprint that both the Planning Commission and the council will be taking up at some point in the near future about how to design improvements along Main Street. So I would encourage folks, if they haven't seen it, haven't read it, like it's on the city's social media channels, please take a chance, read it, get your public input heard. And then I did have the opportunity, I went out with Bonnie Mickelson today. We had a chat about Springfield economic progress and what the chamber's doing and what the city's doing out at the Lions Club this afternoon at Roaring Rapids. Pizza was great, the scenery was great, but it was a really good conversation that went from everything with a local community group, from everything to infrastructure to economic development to as we come out of 2021, how do we really just come together as a community and move forward? All right, any other business from the council? All right, next item, please.
Mayor, we have 2 items under business from the city manager. Item number 1, the DLCD grant application for natural resources inventories and protections. This is a resolution number 1, a resolution in support of a grant application seeking planning assistance from the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development to update the Springfield Natural Resources Study and adopt water quality limited water courses for Springfield's urban growth boundary expansion areas. Monica Sather is here for the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor Van Gordon and Council, and a belated welcome back. A topic of focus for planning staff has been to define a framework for development in the areas where our urban growth boundary recently expanded. This expansion set out to accommodate a needed long-term supply for employment sites and to bring key public lands into Springfield's jurisdiction. I can share a map visual later on if needed. And one of several early steps we are taking to understand where development may be best sited in our expansion areas is to figure out which of our non-built assets like wetlands and riparian corridors in the expansion areas warrant our local protection in addition to state and federal requirements. So this natural resource project started last year and we've made steady progress, but still need to better understand our wildlife habitats and to establish some of our stormwater protections. Once this is done, we'll be able to come to a decision point for how to protect these resources next year and seek direction from council then. To get us there, this is another project that planning proposes to seek a grant for from the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development's Technical Assistance Grant Program. We're grateful for our success in getting this type of funding from the last grant cycle, and we think we have a good chance at an award this year. This next round of funding would primarily support consultant work and additional expertise and staff capacity from the Lane Council of Governments. At this time, we propose that the amount of city funds that would go toward the optional financial match for the grant not exceed the amount we've already budgeted for the project this fiscal year. Lastly, one required piece of the application is council support for the project, hence the request before you this evening for a resolution as demonstration of this support. With that, are there any questions I can help answer or thoughts council would like to share?
Any questions? Joe, did you have questions? You popped back up pretty quick.
No, I just reestablished connections so I could
Okay.
see everybody.
Perfect.
Ready for you?
Go for it.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve resolution number 1.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Neil, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, Counselor Pitts,
Aye.
Counselor Mo,
Yes.
Counselor Rodley,
Yes.
Counselor Stair,
Aye.
Counselor Woodrow,
Yes.
and Counselor Pictionary.
Aye.
All right, the motion passes 6-0. Next item, please.
Next item is any other business from the city manager.
No further business. Thank you.
Any business from the city attorney?
No further business tonight. Thank you.
All right, then it looks like we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Night, everybody.